A lot of people will be like, yeah, that's clear. I mean, we're baseline here, right? We're talking about the basics, and often the basics can elude us. And then there's the will to want to do things and the will to want to do absolutely everything, which may be appropriate at times, but not at others.
So we followed now for 40 years science from the 80s regarding that topic. Did the science change since then?
If we do look at the power of research, then it should be like a systematic review and meta-analysis. One did come out in 2021, which had 40 studies in it and about 1,000 individuals. And it showed that the interference effect is much smaller than we first thought, particularly with everyday gym goers. That kind of almost like a green flag for everybody to go nuts and just do everything all at once and get some progress out of it.
For decades, people have argued if you mix your cardio and strength, they will cancel each other out. Lifters will say cardio kills your muscles. And runners will say strength training makes you heavy. Today, Ian and I will break it down, the myth, the science, and how you train both without wrecking your body and your progress. So Ian, where did all this strength versus cardio controversy start?
So pinpointing exactly where it came from can be difficult, but there was some research in the 1980s that showed that running heavy endurance and heavy strength alongside each other concurrently reduced performance over time. On a very basic physiological level, endurance work is mostly slow twitch fibers. Strength is more predominantly fast twitch fibers. And doing both at once creates more recovery stress and thus a drop in performance overall for either or. Obviously it comes down to things like periodization, which we've discussed in other videos. Generally, you're not going to do all of those things at once, and it would make sense that if you do, you might run into problems in terms of performance and recovery.
So that raised the question, what do we actually mean when we say strength and cardio?
Okay, so aerobic or anaerobic, so presence or absence of oxygen could be one way to phrase that. And strength effectively is how much force you can produce. And this is governed by the ATP-PC system within the body. And it gives you the ability to move objects over a short period of time, let's say 10 to 15 seconds. That's a very basic way to put it. Cardio is basically your ability to keep moving for longer, or endurance work. You can think of things like rowing or cycling or running for sort of mid to long distances. And this is what's using the aerobic system for longer steady state endurance or cardio. And then you've got the glycolytic system, which is for shorter efforts. And this essentially is building your energy network, so you're having more capillary density and a better use of oxygen whilst you're doing that work if you continue to work on your fitness. The lines can often get blurred in CrossFit and Hyrox, whereby everything is happening all at once. And it's kind of like, where's the strength element? Where's the cardio element? And where's the bit in the middle? Or how does it all work together? And so on. And obviously, if with proper periodization, and periodization is essentially managing your training blocks over time. So effectively, that's kind of what we're talking about there.
So the idea of just putting everything together and smashing like a mixed workout, is that a myth, or can we just not do like everything together?
Those that care less about how their training is structured, beginners, I think we'll see a lot of progress by doing things all at once. But at some point you are going to run into a wall, plateau, potentially get injured. Maybe you haven't built capacity strength-wise in a certain area, and then you continue to load it until there's leakage or energy leakage at a weak point. Maybe you build an engine or you get fitter in a specific zone, but then you neglect another zone. And of course then we're talking about periodization. And this is slightly more of an advanced technique, but we've also talked about applying that to beginners, which is relevant to some extent.
So we followed now for 40 years, we followed now science from the 80s regarding that topic. Did the science change since then?
If we do look at the power of research, then it should be like a systematic review and meta-analysis. One did come out in 2021, which had 40 studies in it and about 1,000 individuals, which is relatively powerful. And it showed that the interference effect is much smaller than we first thought, particularly with everyday gym goers. So that kind of is like almost like a green flag for everybody to go nuts and just do everything all at once and get some progress out of it. And I think, you know, that's where you could fall short. It means that maybe the concurrent effect wasn't as bad as we thought, but for people who are training more methodically, it probably still does. You still need to apply the relevant amount of effort and the relevant amount of recovery for performance. And the study also showed that there was a significant reduction in explosive power. And that tells us quite a lot. It tells us that the endurance work that's being done is potentially having an effect on the fast twitch fibers, which we might need to react a little bit quicker. Now, in certain sports, the idea is to produce force as quickly as possible. in almost every sport actually. So can you get to the medal or the prize with the least amount of effort? And that is essentially moving your body or an object with precision and the right amount of force production. And so if you're training all at once and it's affecting your ability to do that, then you are potentially going to run into some problems. So I'm being careful, I'm caveating it, but maybe it isn't as bad as we thought for the everyday individual. I would still argue that it's important. I use explosive or plyometric training for long distance runners and people that are running for 2 hours or 2+ hours, and we're still using fast twitch fiber or explosive exercises to improve running economy, then that needs to be done within an adequate time frame. So whilst they're not running as much, during the lowest part of their endurance phase, we will introduce some explosive training to improve their endurance.
Yes.
So the two things are working together, but not concurrently, or they are working concurrently, but they're planned in a different way to just throwing everything in and the kitchen sink into the mix.
So that would mean you would also program for a powerlifter, you would program some cardio stuff. So obviously the cardio would help my lifting then as well. I can do it all.
I want to say yes and no. I want to say yes. I think for heart health and general well-being, better aerobic fitness could improve your recovery between sets, let's say. So you're a little bit less out of breath. And we know you need to pack on a little bit of size to be a powerlifter, to manage those heavy loads, as long as it's managed well, right? So it's going to be clear when they're doing too much and it's impacting the amount of strength output they have. And then we're also going to be able to see when they're recovering better between sets. You know, there should be like an adequate trade-off between those two, rest between sets versus the amount of load that they can lift. And so that might be a bit of trial and error for a powerlifter. I think that when they get close to needing to lift competitively, all the effort needs to go into recovery, you know, peaking at the right time and then recovery, and everything that goes on top of them having to lift a maximal load is adding more stress to their body and their ability to be well recovered in time for competition. Ultimately, you have to match what your training output is, so not violating specificity overall, but adding bits and pieces for individualization or for individuals who perhaps might be more, they might potentially need it. And I would say that most people probably do, whether they're lifting maximally or whether they're running a marathon. You know, you can balance those two things. But essentially, training should be a loop, so work, recover, adapt. And we have to kind of think about it like that. If you skip recovery, then you're going to start sliding backwards.
Okay, so now we talked about like a very specific endurance athlete and powerlifter already. So when we talk about the average sports guy, like how should people split their time then?
So you could follow a 70-30 rule or an 80-20 rule, depending on what your goals are. And that is 70% strength, 30% cardio. And that cardio, like if it is kind of like maximal load in powerlifting stuff, then that cardio should potentially not be too impactful on the strength aspect. But for, you know, the everyday person, you can sort of look at it from that perspective. What exactly is in those 70 and 30% is going to be a bit of trial and error for people. You can also flip it if cardio is the goal. So 70-30 in favor of cardio. If you're going to do those sessions on the same day, ideally you're going to split them through the week and, you know, 6 to 8 hours recovery between. And some people might say that people should do strength first and cardio later. You should prioritize what's more important for you. But, you know, the impact of strength is going to take a little bit more time to recover from than cardio. So potentially, and for me, I know you could feel quite tired after doing a cardio session, but I think I would rather do the lighter cardio session first and then the strength later. But if it's a higher heart rate zoned cardiovascular activity and your strength session is not as nuts, maybe you can flip the two, right? So there's a bunch of different ways to do it, but most often I would put cardio early in the day and strength later in the day with a few caveats.
Okay, so it depends on the focus, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, pairing heavy leg day with long runs or even interval runs, probably worse, right? I think you're going to struggle to recover from that, and that's going to start impacting on your other sessions. That should make sense for anybody. But easy cardio, like some light rowing or some easy cycling, less impact, potentially it's working a bit better.
And then it comes, of course, to like a little bit the bigger schedule, talking about periodization. Can you give some examples of how this could look through the year?
Yeah, so a powerlifter in the off season could do 2 to 3 sessions a week, but near competition cut cardio completely, and this is basically what we said before.
Yeah.
For a marathon runner, we're talking opposite ends of the spectrum here, 2 to 3 strength sessions. Maybe they're basic strength sessions running into things like more explosive work, and then as the running starts to peak up, then they're going to pull those strength sessions back because they need all that time to recover from the running, but they've built the strength base hopefully to make them more resilient in the latter half, and obviously reducing the amount of lifting that they're doing. But in essence, you should shift the focus depending on the goal and not having everything all at once 100% of the time, and it should make sense that that's probably not a good idea.
I mean, and all this, does it change depending on how long a person's been training already, like training maturity?
Yeah, so beginners, almost anything, as we know, we've alluded to this quite a few times, and that is they're building capacity, they're building those neurological connections. But as you get more intermediate, a little bit more planning. And I think you'll often speak to people who maybe don't want to plan as much. Some people anecdotally will be absolutely fine, just continually crushing it, and maybe like just intrinsically or internally they're figuring out how to push and back off.
Yeah.
Maybe they're just going to class trainings and that's working well for them. But the more you train over time, even if you are one of those people, as you get older, it can be a little bit smarter to plan, even on a very basic level.
And also when it comes to when you want to make progress in one specific area. For example, I'm talking about high rocks. If you come to a point where in the pro version where the sled will be too heavy for you, then you have to focus obviously on a strength part. And then you cannot smash like just high rocks workouts all the time and like assuming that you get better in sled push. Like that would be a very easy example. Yes, so overall this whole cardio kills gains theory, is that overblown?
I think what we're saying here is that it might be slightly over exaggerated to some extent. If it's carefully managed is what we're saying, that it should be fine. So we're sort of trying to tread that line between people understanding that it's not that everything's fine, you can go to and do your CrossFit workout and just smash everything. You're more of a generalist or a jack of all trades, master of none. And I think you do need to master certain aspects of strength and endurance separately in order for them to work together efficiently. If you look at a lot of the elite CrossFit Games athletes, of course they're genetically gifted, their ability, their mindset, they've really got their craft dialed in. People like Tia Toomey, for example, I mean, she's been crushing it for years and years and years. 8 years, having a child in between, recovering from that. Yeah. Obviously, as we've talked about this before in another episode, they have the time and the money to dial in all of those aspects, but they may be doing double days whereby they're applying what works for them in terms of strength and endurance splits through the day, AM and PM sessions. They're loading effectively and properly with calories. They're getting enough recovery and sleep. They have a support network around them. Amongst everything else, obviously being just an absolute champion at pretty much everything with the right mindset. So CrossFit from the outside or High Rocks might look like all you have to do is just go into the gym and crush all those workouts and you're going to become some kind of a champion. But the truth is that if you want to be really elite or truly elite at those things, you have to separate them. So we're saying that as a beginner, you can just go at it and build capacity on all levels, and it's more general. But as you train more and more, you will have to start separating them if you want to make progress.
And I think it makes sense to look at, for example, documentaries of those athletes, because there it comes out that there is a lot of stuff that you don't see normally. So you don't see someone being on a very, very low heart rate zone 2 hours in the morning to just build capacity for everything else that comes with more intensity.
Right.
Yeah. So in the end, you can do both, but just not everything and not 100% all the time, right?
Yeah. I'm aware that's possibly not helping some people. I think a lot of people will be like, yeah, that's clear. I mean, we're baseline here, right? We're talking about the basics, and often the basics can elude us. And it's kind of like, well, what can I do? And then there's the will to want to do things and the will to want to do absolutely everything, which may be appropriate at times, but not at others. Most people want to progress. And so if you want to progress, then usually separating those modalities. So picking a goal, plan your week, recover properly. And that's kind of the hybrid training reality, I guess, to some extent.
Good. So assuming that you have a goal and that you want to make progress, we tried to to split a little bit or to explain a little bit strength and cardio. With this, we leave you for today. We enjoyed our talk. I hope you too. And leave some comments whether we should talk about other topics or whether you want to know more about this topic. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the algorithm.
But like Donald Trump when I was talking about it. I had such a good sleep last night. It was amazing. It was the best sleep anyone's ever had.
Yeah.
No one's had a better sleep than me.
Yes, and no one will ever have.